Hey everyone, welcome back to Rhythm Railroad. So today I'm working on my river scene, which is basically the central scene of the layout. I imagine most photographs are going to be taken here. At least that's the way I imagined it when I first designed everything. So right now I'm working on the river bed. This is the big project for me right now. As you can see, the bridges are pretty much in place, so the piers are done. I kind of have surrounding dirt and sand and stuff like that, which I will be tweaking. I'm not crazy about um, the coloring yet. I'm gonna have to, go back and just tweak that. By the way, just a side note, I've been using for the fine dirt. I've been using grout, and then I've been using a little like really fine ballast for the highlights and for just to give it a little contrast. But the difference between the ballast and the caulk, as far as the coloring, is a little too extreme. I want to tone it down a little bit so it doesn't look so spotty like that. So I might paint over it a little bit with like an airbrush, or maybe once it dries, maybe hit it with a little powder or something. But anyways, that's not the point. The point is that I'm trying to get my riverbed figured out. And at first I was just going to do a solid, olive green color and just make it look like a deep river. But as I watch YouTube videos on riverbeds and things like that and models, I kind of got interested in making almost like a shallow, rocky, bouldery kind of a river, similar to this picture, which I'm going to be probably using as like a continuing photograph in the back. So the idea is that that's going to sit all the way back there, and it's going to make it look like it continues out. So the boulders and things like that is what I'm trying to go for here. Not as aggressive as that, but like maybe just like small boulders. And I have a few things here. I have stuff like this size, which might be okay, but I also got a smaller size. Hard to see, but kind of like that. So maybe a combination of both and a little dirt in between, or a little sand. And the idea is that I'm probably going to put it over the high spots here on this riverbed that I'm creating, just so that they stick up a little bit over the water. But again, I'm still kind of playing around with that. What I tried to do is create the riverbed so that it has obviously elevated areas all over the place. And the deeper parts are represented by the darker green, and the shallower parts are represented by the less dark green, or brownish green. And the way I achieved that, which I'm kind of liking, by the way, is by using Sculptamold. I mixed it kind of on the dry side. I didn't make it too soupy, and then just kind of plopped it around and tried to keep it kind of flat, but allow the material to kind of do its own thing. And this is the result. I mean, it looks pretty cool. And then what I did is I hit it with this color, Earth Undercoat, which is kind of like a greenish brown. That's what you see there, really. But what happens is when the Sculptamold is still kind of wet, there's plaster in there, so it almost does the same thing that a rock mold would do. Like the effect that you get when you do a wash over a rock mold, you see the white tones, and it kind of creates this like mixture of like browns and greens. I didn't put any brown here at all. It was just simply that color. That's the only thing I put on here. That wash that I just showed you. And by the way, I don't know if it's a wash. It's just liquid pigment here, according to this, but this was given to me, and it's like really watered down. So I have a feeling the last person that used this, diluted the paint to a point where, it was really watered down like that. So whatever that they did, it worked out great, because as soon as they put it on top of the plaster or a Sculptamold, it spread out kind of like like that. And then it, it finds the little crevices and things like that. It's great to do that. It just happens naturally. It's I didn't have to really work that hard. So I kind of just went with it. I was experimenting with it, and I just kept going with it. And the more I did it, the more I liked it. And of course, you have to wait and give it time for it to do its thing while it dries and settles. This is actually my second go at it, but the way I did it today, since I let it dry for about 24 hours. It's not fully dry yet, which I kind of prefer. So the plaster to the touch is still a little wet, tiny bit. So what I did today is I found the low spots, and I did a second coat of that pigment, and you can see now it really stands out, and you can really start seeing the highlights of the browns versus the dark green or the olive green. And that creates a sense of like a riverbed with very uneven with a very uneven base. And so I'm going to continue with this, and worst comes to worst, if I don't like it, I could just scrape it up and start again. But it's looking pretty good from what I can see here. Now here's the tricky part. I'm trying to figure out, and I'm kind of making this video to see if I can get some suggestions. There's a lot of very, very talented people that know how to do this really well. But this is my first riverbed like this. I've always made just like the plain, Envirotex, one color on the base, on the base material, and then just fill it with Envirotex, and that's it. Which I'm okay with, because it does give it that depth. And I know some people like to do just the gloss, or the glossy, like the Mod Podge that's like glossy, and just kind of build it up. And that's fine. I might even do that too. But I think what I want to do is, once again, create a little sense of depth with the Envirotex. So I want to get the water level to a point where it's just under the peaks of these little, bumps, I guess, or like little mounds and things like that, right? So the tricky part for me has always been, how high do I paint? Like, where do I actually make it look like green versus brown? Like, for example, here on the piers and here on the edges. And what I find is that, if you make it too high on one side or too low on the other side, when you put the Envirotex down, then, this thing, it's going to go to the lowest point. So it's going to build up in certain areas and not so much in other areas, unless everything's perfectly flat. But even when it's perfectly flat, how are you supposed to know, what the actual height is going to be? And especially with this kind of situation where you're trying to show that there's, material above the water as well. So the only thing I can come up with, and if somebody knows a better way, I'd really love to hear about it. But was, when I first built this area, I made sure that it was perfectly level, because I knew there was going to be water involved, a water scene for that matter. So I just rechecked it, because, things settle and stuff and they move. And it's still very much level. You can see it there. So I know that this whole thing is sitting flat as can be anyway. So my what I imagine is that when I pour the Envirotex in, obviously by building a dam up here, I'm going to get a pretty level result. Therefore, the height of the water is going to be equal all the way through the perimeter of the river here. So in order for me to figure out, where to apply the paint and how high to go with the green, what I decided to do was get one of these laser levels. The one I have is this Bosch level, which I've had for all my projects here in the basement and stuff and around the house. But what's nice about these is that when you turn it on, you get horizontal and vertical, and it self-levels. So right now, all I'm interested in is the horizontal. So, you click it again, and it just gives you a straight line. Now, this side button here is basically a lock. So when it's released, it's just going to bounce around until it finds level, which is right there. And then you can lock it if you want. But what I'm trying to see is if this will help me, which it's looking like it will, to find that perimeter, or how high to paint that green line, right? So obviously I'd have to creep up a little bit here, right? And over here as well to get to that line, which will then dictate, you know, once I start pouring the Envirotex, how high that's going to go. Now, my plan, because Envirotex tends to creep up on the sides of things, just the nature of the material, I plan to put it just under that line. So in other words, fill it just under the line, so that then later I can go with, you know, I'm going to add ripples and things like that with the matte medium, or the gloss medium, sorry. So with the Mod Podge gloss, I'm going to add waves and ripples and things like that. So that'll give me a little more height. And then I could work it up to the dirt without letting it creep, right? Like you do with the liquid, because the liquid you don't really have that much control over. But again, I do want to use it to create a little depth. So I think that's plenty. You know, I mean, you can kind of see here where it's going to be. So it's like half of my pinky here, right? Which means that, you know, that's going to be the height of the water, obviously. So, you know, right around here somewhere. So you're going to see a little bit of depth. I might go a tiny bit higher, so you can really see, you know, when you look at it through here, you can see, you know, a nice chunk of water. But then the problem is that you see how the laser is also hitting the peaks of the material here. So that's what's going to be showing, you know, above the water, or that's where the water line is going to be. So anything above that is going to be showing. So it is hitting a lot of points, and it doesn't have to be like protruding like big time, but you know, I would like for some things to stick out a little bit. So I might build some of these up a little bit just to get a little more height. And because the problem is, if I go any higher, you know, to get the depth up here, then what's going to end up happening is that everything else that I want to show through is going to be too low, right? So like let's say I go just slightly higher. I'm looking for something to lift this with, but I don't know, this might not do much, but I'm just trying to elevate this a little bit. So if I take, for example, another one of these little pieces, this one's a little thick, but I'll take the laser away for a second and put this down here, and then put the laser back on. So now, you know, it's significantly higher, right? So we're looking at almost an entire, like 3/4 of my pinky is going to be all water. So that might be the way to go with this, because I do want to make sure that, you know, it's a significant amount, and so that you can see through this way once I build a dam and all that stuff. So I don't know, I'm gonna play around with this a little bit. I gotta decide what I'm gonna do, because you know, once I paint it, it's kind of hard to go back. But you know, the idea is that I'm gonna paint up to the line here, like I said before. So that looks a little bit much now that I look at it. It might be a little too high, you know, but I don't know. I got to live with this a little bit and see where it goes. But just, you know, putting it out there, see if anybody has any suggestions, tips, tricks, anything like that. So please let me know. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching.